start off our day here by a welcoming from our Mayor Pro Tem, Keith Moore. As Keith is coming up here, we also have Councilperson Joe Carstro and Councilperson Gil Corporate with us. Thank you. And Sherry Friedenrich, our illustrious, beautiful treasurer. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out. It's hard to believe this is the 15th annual already. It means we're all getting older, but beats the alternative. Fantastic weather here in Surf City, USA. I'll tell a quick little story. I wore my name tag today because last year I showed up, I just rode my bike, my tank, and flip-flops, and I was sitting there and somebody came up and said, "Hey, congratulations on your election. Can you autograph my program?" And I was like, "I got elected 2 years ago, but yeah, sure." And my sister's embarrassed to ask you, so can you do hers too? I said, "Yeah." And I sat there, I'm thumbing through, and they brought Scott Farnsworth up to be inducted. I looked at his picture and he had blonde hair. And I was, oh my God, they think I'm Scott Farnsworth. So today I wore a name tag, so I apologize if that person's here today for messing up your program. So have a great day. Thank you to Mike and Ron and Bobby and the other Mike, and Big Mike's probably watching us, for putting this on every year and everything you've done to make us Surf City, USA, and to thank and honor the folks that create this culture for us. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you. I also want to introduce the Surfing Walk of Fame people who are with us this morning. Judy McKay, the current president, is back in the crowd someplace there. And so is Chris McDonald here taking pictures. He's our ambassador for the Surfing Museum, and there are several other members here too. Thank you. I'll now turn it over to PT to get started. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. If you've been to this before, you know my rules is because the sun's out early, I try to get it done in an hour, and try to keep my introductions as brief as possible, because it's the honorees' day, and they can speak however long they want, because it's their moment in the sun, and literally in the sun, because the sun's out early this morning. So with all that said, let's get started. The first thing I'd really like to do is acknowledge that this is the 15th year of the Surfing Walk of Fame, and we now have over 100 names on the sidewalk, and I think we really should give a round of applause to Jax, who started this thing 15 years ago. With the intentions of honoring our past, and I think that's what's fantastic. I mean, a couple of the people we get up here today, the younger generation across the street owe their ability to earn a living from surfing because of these people, and they're forgotten until today when we bring them up here, and I think that's the beauty of what we do. So with that said, every year we the board of directors, select some deserving individuals that we think deserve to have their name on the sidewalks of Huntington Beach. Because sometimes those individuals are unknown. The rest of the inductees, other than the honor roll, are voted on by 200 members of the media, the inductees themselves, and so that's a process that's just normal, like in any other Hall of Fame, Walk of Fame, like baseball, football, whatever it is. It's done the same way, but in this case, the honor roll is actually selected by the board of directors. And for me, I'm personally attached to this one because when I first came to Huntington Beach back in the mid-70s and then resided here permanently after '79, I couldn't believe when I came to this town that they had a program that allowed you to do surfing in school. I mean, that in Australia was unheard of because we all went to school in the same grey uniform, and there was no way you were going surfing while you were in school. And they actually had truant officers that were down at the beaches in Coolangatta looking for us. And so that to me was just an incredible thing. And so with that said, we're going to honor the NSSA, National Scholastic Surfing Association founders today, and the 30th anniversary of them. And to introduce them, I'm going to bring up longtime Executive Director Janice Aragon, herself a Surfing Walk of Fame inductee. And it's really, she's carried on the legacy along with Gayleen Clifford for the last 20 years of the NSSA. And so it's my great pleasure to bring Janice Aragon to the podium.
Thank you, PT. And I would also like to thank the Huntington Beach Surfing Walk of Fame Board of Directors for inviting me to speak on behalf of this very worthy induction of the NSSA founders, Chuck Allen, Holly Allen, Tom Gibbons, Rob Hill, Dr. Laird Hayes, and John Rothrock into the honor roll of the Surfing Walk of Fame. I would like to start off by offering a special acknowledgement to the late John Rothrock, whose presence is missed here today. And even though he hasn't been with us for over a decade, his influence remains a constant in the operations and continued progression of the NSSA. John's love for the sport, his fondness for kids, his unique sense of humor, and the first-hand insight and knowledge he shared with me still flows throughout this organization. But getting to the bigger picture, I'd like to paint the picture of American competitive surfing in the late 70s. It was in the dark ages, in a state of turmoil. Surfers were stereotyped as your typical beach bums, giving the sport a bad name. The surfing organizations and contests that did exist were disorganized and lacked focus and discipline. By 1978, the disarray was enough for these concerned and devoted individuals that are going to be honored today to create a surfing association that would unite all of America's competitive surfers under one common banner. The NSSA was established, but with one unique key prerequisite for its members. They were all required to be in school, maintaining passing grades. The founders hoped their vision of combining education with surfing would change the old punkish Spicoli impression and raise the public image of the sport. And as it turned out, their objective was right on target. The NSSA's structured, well-managed events and scholastic ideals spread like wildfire. The value of our founders' contributions can be measured by all of the accomplishments and achievements of the organization's membership. In the past 30 years, the NSSA has kicked off the careers of numerous successful professional surfers, including several world champions, one of which is being honored today, Andy Irons. The NSSA has also seen doctors, lawyers, legends, lifeguards, and virtually the entire surf industry groomed on its competitive format. To this day, the NSSA and the national championships continue its role of being the major stepping stone to professional surfing. And with the many changes and developments the sport has seen, our founders' core message still rings loud and clear. The connection between surfing and scholastics go hand in hand. American surfing, as it has evolved over the past 30 years, as it is today, and as it will progress into the future, is indebted to the unparalleled, invaluable contributions of Chuck, Tom, Laird, Rob, Holly, and John. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Stay up here for minutes. Would like to bring up at this time, sitting over here, these three gentlemen, Tom Gibbons, Rob Hill, Laird Hayes, and over here,
John's widow, Jane Rothrock.
it was the foresight of these individuals who were all in the teaching world that got this organization up and running. I think one of the things I would just like to add, at the NSSA's banquet a few weeks ago, we were talking about the whole scholastic issue and how it's changed somewhat with homeschool and everything. And I just wanted to remind all the parents out there, the great reason these guys started this was to keep kids educated and keep them in school for their afterlife. And I know in my own personal life, besides your parents, I think some of the greatest mentors you have are teachers. And I think for that reason we need to give the teachers a round of applause, because sometimes they're the ones that help us as parents get us to adulthood. And I think that's often forgotten. And that spirit really, I think, really epitomizes why the NSSA was started. Now, I'm not sure how these gentlemen want to do this. If they all want to speak, someone wants to speak for them, but they all deserve it if you want to come to the microphone. So who wants to go first? Tom, you coming up?
Only because they know I'm full of, you know
I
what.
got Chuck over here. Look at that.
Thank you very much, Janice, and thank you very much, Peter, and thank you very much for the organization, Jax, who puts this affair on every year for the last 15 years. I think it's absolutely wonderful to recognize people who give to the sport, who are outstanding in the sport, and have established credibility in the sport by their peers. You know, I could go on and tell all your stories about why we started the NSSA, but basically we wanted to, as Janice eloquently stated, is to give surfing credibility, because in the late 70s, surfing had a relatively negative image. And we also knew that schools has a positive image. So our goal was to bring together the surfing community as well as the educational community. And therefore, we decided to tap into high schools as well as colleges and universities. Laird Hayes, the first vice president, was Dean of Students at Orange Coast College at that time. And I might also say the very first surf coach to get a pep band and cheerleaders down to the beach for his surf team. Okay? Laird Hayes also wears a Super Bowl ring, as he does officiating now in the NFL. I guess that's the only one, right? You can tell I'm a real football fan. And of course, Chuck Allen, a longtime friend, and just did an awful lot of work in those first 2 and 3 years for the NSSA, and brought a lot of resources to our survival in that. And of course, John, I think Janice has said some very, very nice things about John, and John was a personal friend of mine. We had property together in Hawaii, surfed together, and of course was a great coach at Edison High School. And Rob Hill kind of established a winning tradition at Huntington Beach High School for his surf team, and did an outstanding job, and of course is down now in North San Diego County and doing exceptionally well. Myself, I'm kind of like, my students call me a dead teenager because I still teach surfing at Cal State Long Beach, and have been doing that for 30-some years and absolutely love it. Chuck was one of my students when I was teaching actually at Orange Coast College, and that's how we met. So the NSSA, though, has been a great organization. We've had some great leadership, and this lady to my left has contributed tremendously to it. I will leave you with my last comments with saying, take a look at your program. And in the program where it talks about the NSSA, you will see a logo in there. This logo is a collector's item, and I'll tell you why. We did not have a logo when we started the organization 30 years ago. So we talked to Laird Hayes to contact one of the art students at Orange Coast College. And we paid this student, he selected one, paid him $50. And he gave us this logo that you currently have in your program. And if you look very carefully at the program, after we had the decals made, the stationery made with the president of Orange Coast College on the letterhead, Jim Jinks, Steve Pesman, just the who's of surfing at the time, as well as our superintendent of schools, the superintendent of San Juan Capistrano. And as this was done, we looked at this decal as 2 of my students came running into my high school where I was teaching at Marina High School at the time, and they said to me, "Cool, coach, totally cool." And I said, "Well, what do you mean, cool, totally cool?" And they continued to point out to me, in that drawing, the decal that you have, in the upper right-hand corner, you will see the dots there and an outline of a nude woman. Now, as an educator, we were trying to improve the image of surfing, right? You think I could just see my job on the line. I'm sure, as well as Laird and Rob and all of us educators. But at any rate, John Rothrock and I went over to Edison High School, pulled all of the decals, all of the stationery, and John, with his great printing ability, dotted out all those little things. But you have a collector's item with that decal that you have in there today. So once again, it's an honor, and if anyone else would like to speak, I want them to feel free to do so. Chuck?
I've had better stories than Tom. Why we got into it was because of the money and the girls. No other reason. There's been no money, no girls. They had an interesting story. Bobby, this guy, we were in Panama in 70s or 80s, forget which. He and Ian were out surfing at this place by Rio Mar. All of a sudden, Peter comes paddling in, he's got little red welts all over him. So Ian said, there's a sea lice. So, oh my God. So Ian said, well, you know what we need to do? We need to urinate on your wounds. It'll neutralize it. He said, no, you're not going to do that. So I was telling this story to my surf class at Huntington Beach High School, and I always had a spicoli every year. I love spicoli. I had one every year. Just some kid, you're goofy. So anyway, I told the story. Well, he goes down to Trestles next week with his buddies. Every year at Trestles, these little shells, some animals dying on the beach and they crunch, like popcorn or something. So he said, what is this? And they said, oh, dude, those are sea lice. Oh man, you're gonna die. So we'll urinate on your feet, which they did. That's all the story I'm going to tell.
Okay, we want to get a photograph of these guys all up here together before we move on with the rest of the ceremony. So if we could all get to this side so we can get the media. And Rob, Rob, you're welcome, of course, Rob. I thought you deferred to Tom, but if Laird, anyone who wants to speak, it's open mic.
Tom's a windy guy, but anyway, this is really nice that everybody showed up. I see a lot of my old students here and relatives.
How old are you?
I don't know how old some of them are. Anyway, I want to mention that I was the first competition director of the NSSA, and we heard about this young kid up in Santa Barbara that was just absolutely a fantastic surfer. So I spent some time, I was born and raised in Santa Barbara, so I spent some time calling around and everything, finding out about this young kid. And we finally got him down to one of our big contests and everything. And as it turned out, it was Tom Curran. And of course, he went on to be world champion, I don't know how many times. So anyway, it all started, I mean, we got him down here to surf. We heard about this young kid in Santa Barbara and so on. I just wanted to tell you about how things do happen. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, so let's, for the media's sake, we're going to get the founders all on this one side of the podium. And Janice, I want you to be in that photo too. Okay, thanks guys. Another round of applause for the founders of truly a great American institution in surfing, the NSSA. Okay, so that's now we're moving on to the regular induction, of which we have 5 categories. And as we move on, I just want to acknowledge a great piece of art that was created for the 15th anniversary right here. That Howard Kirk, if you remember back to our 10th anniversary, Howard painted a great painting of the Duke. And so this year he took it upon himself to paint, inspired by the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's album cover. He took all the heads of all the inductees, all 100 of them, and painted them into this photo. And our inductees around the middle. And I just think that Howard deserves a round of applause too, because I know how long it took him to do this painting. And as we move on here to our first inductee today, I'd just like to acknowledge out in the audience an inductee that was unable to attend when we inducted him. a few years back as a surfing champion. He's over here for Sean Thompson's film, which premieres tomorrow night at the Lido. Mr. Wayne Rabbit Bartholomew standing right over here. Sean Thompson also, who is responsible for this great film that you can check out opening in theatres. I see him over there making deals on his cell phone. He's waving to everybody, so I'd like to acknowledge Sean. A couple other personalities that star in the film are also here today. Michael Thompson somewhere out there in the audience, and I believe Ian Cairns is out there somewhere too. So I just want to acknowledge those guys, and particularly Rabbit, who was unable to attend when we inducted him. So moving on. Our first induction today is and everybody goes, well, how can he get in? He's only, he's only in his 20s. But the interesting thing with Andy Irons, who can't be with us today because of obligations, is that 10 years ago already, he won the US Open of Surfing out here, 10 years ago. And that's our criteria. From the time you win your first championship, either in Huntington Beach or somewhere in the world, that makes you eligible to be in the Surfing Walk of Fame. So Andy Irons, of course, as Janice mentioned, came up through the NSSA ranks, was an NSSA champion, and comes from Kauai, the famous lineage of the Irons brothers, their parent, their father, and also their uncle. All were surfers from California who ended up escaping to Hawaii. And Andy and his brother Bruce, of course, have become dominant figures in the world of surfing today. So on behalf of Andy, I'd like to bring up Graham Stapleberg from Billabong, who's been taking care of Andy for some time. And Graham, where are you? He's right here.
Thanks, BT. Well, firstly, on behalf of Andy and Billabong, I'd like to extend my greetings and acknowledgement to the Surfing Walk of Fame. And also specifically want to thank Jax, Ronnie, Ron and Bobby. Thanks also for your continued support of this fantastic annual event. Andy Irons, as PT mentioned, has asked me to convey sincere apologies for not being here today, and wanted to thank the board and voting members of Surfing's Walk of Fame for validating his achievement at the 1998 US Open of Surfing at Huntington Beach. It seems some time ago, but recently I had a chat with Andy at J Bay, and it still lives fresh in his memory. For him, it was a huge undertaking, a huge achievement, competing in the large crowds at Huntington Beach. People from around the world come here to, to try and do well, because it leaves a legacy for them. And certainly, from Andy's point of view, that helped launch his what considers to be one of the more successful careers on the ASB World Championship Tour. Unfortunately, Andy could not be here in person due to prior commitments. One of his sponsors, i.e. Billabong, we have an international photo shoot in Bali, and he's continuing in preparation for the next World Championship Tour, which is taking place in that same area, which he really wants to try and win. But again, he really apologized for not being here. He would also like to personally thank his wife, Lindy, his family, sponsors, namely Billabong, VZ, Nixon, Red Bull and Deccan, and his management, WMG, for their ongoing support through his career. He would also like to congratulate the 2008 inductees, Buzzy Trent, Wayne Lynch, Drew Campion, Lynn Boyer, Rich Chu, and the NSSA Foundation, founders I should say, 1978. For him, it is an honor for him to be acknowledged alongside these surfers who have made such an amazing impact and contribution to both our sport and culture. So on behalf of Andy, once again, I sincerely thank you.
So that was our surfing champion induction for 2008, Mr. Andy Irons. The next category is the Surf Pioneers. And as we start talking about the Surf Pioneers, the category is for those who passed the age of 50, and actually now that it's 15 years, we may have to adjust that to 60. But that's how we started it. You had to be 50-year-old to be even considered in this category, because a lot of these guys, there weren't real championships. And as it happens, some of these guys pass away before they're inducted, and that's the case with our first Pioneer inductee today, Buzzy Trent. But I'm really, really honored to have somebody to talk about Buzzy and accept on his behalf. When I was a Grom, This was one of the guys that was already a legend in the magazines and everything, and he had a move that I emulated. I loved this move, and particularly in the clean waves of my home, and it was called the Cheetah 5, or the Paul Stroud nose ride. And with that, I would like to bring the man up here himself that invented that move, Paul Stroud.
Thank you, PT. Well, it's quite an honor, believe me, to accept on behalf of Buzzy. He was a very close personal friend over many, many years, and to describe him, I have to say that he was not only fearless in terms of not only riding waves and big waves at that, but also in life in general. He was very colorful, and he had quite a personality, very dynamic personality. I remember paddling out to Sunset Beach for the first time when I was 15, and I don't know, all of you who surf, whenever you're going to an area that's foreign to you, never been there before, you kind of have trepidations, and you know, and I spent about an hour and a half watching the water and the waves and the timing, the sets and everything, and said, okay, it's time to go out. So paddle out by myself, and the waves were about 10 to 12 feet. And you paddle up to the lineup and you try to blend in the lineup and just kind of watch the dynamics of the crowd there. But as I got close, there was only one voice that I could hear, and it was coming from Buzzy. And he was talking about skin diving. And I watched as I got closer, and he was telling this huge story about how he was diving and got a big fish and trying to wrestle it to the surface. And I looked around, and everybody else, they weren't really looking at him. They're probably listening, but they're all looking at the horizon because there was a huge set coming in, and they didn't want to leave because they didn't want to have to deal with Buzzy later for cutting out on his story. But he had a magnetism and a real incredible determination. I guess that's the best word I could say. But I want to share just a couple more stories. You know, it's been written that he worked for Dillingham Corporation, which is a large construction company in Hawaii. And during the construction of the Ala Moana Shopping Center, they were building the Ala Moana Hotel, which sits off on the Diamond Head side of the property. And he was up on the 12th floor working on the window mullion when someone walked by him carrying a load of lumber on his shoulder, another worker, and someone called him. So he spun around to look at who was calling him, and the lumber knocked Buzzy out of the window. And he filled 2 stories and hit rebar, and was able to grab a hold of rebar, and he made his way back in through that lower level, walked up the stairs, and beat the crap out of that guy. So that story just went through, not only through the construction company, but through the beach and area. So everybody had a real special respect for Buzzy. So whenever he paddled for a wave, everybody sat up on their board. But there was one more story, besides being fearless, and I also give him credit for bringing so many people into Hawaii for the lure of surfing. There was a photograph taken in 1954 of Makaha, and the waves were about 20 feet. It's a very famous photo. I'm sure you've seen it once, and it was a photo of 3 surfers riding from the point, coming into the bowl. And the first surfer on the lower side was Woody Brown, and then George Downing in the middle, and then Buzzy Trent up high. But that picture went out on UPI and wire services across the country, and I know so many people were touched by that photo, especially those that surfed in California, and many of them made their way to Hawaii after that. But one more quick story. Buzzy gave up surfing in the mid-70s because it just got too crowded, and a lot of the special qualities of riding big waves changed because the crowds were so impacting, and it wasn't the same. But he took up hang gliding, and he became a very accomplished hang glider. So this was in the very late 70s. I was with my family down at Ala Moana Beach Park. And for those of you who've been to Hawaii, it's a big beach park, and then there's a long beach there surrounded by a breakwater. So I'm just looking out at the horizon, and